On the morning of January 12, 1888, it was 40 degrees on the Great Plains, and the sun was shining. Parents sent their children to school without coats. By dawn the next day, more than 200 of those children were dead, scattered across the open prairie. One 17-year-old girl had frozen standing upright against a tree, her younger siblings huddled at her feet. She had been trying to shield them. To understand how that happened, you have to go back to the lies that brought their families here in the first place. In the 1880s, railroad companies owned huge pieces of the American plains. The federal government had given them enormous land grants, 16% of Nebraska's total land alone, and the railroads needed settlers to buy the land around the tracks and ship crops by rail. And so they printed brochures in a dozen languages and sent them across Europe, promising one of the most beautiful climates in the world, rich soil, and plenty of rain. A professor named Samuel Aughey gave them the science to back it up, a theory that sounded reasonable and turned out to be completely wrong. Rainfall follows the plow. Break the sod, and the rain would come. The Homestead Act offered 160 free acres to anyone willing to live on the land for 5 years and work it, and more than 750,000 immigrants took the deal. Norwegians from narrow rocky valleys, Germans from the overtaxed towns of Saxony, Bohemian Czechs, Ukrainian Mennonites. They sold everything they had, packed what they could carry, and left. They crossed an ocean, rode trains to the end of the line, and stepped off into a treeless flatland none of them had ever seen anything like. There were no forests to cut lumber from, so they built houses out of the prairie itself, cutting strips of turf into 50-pound bricks and stacking them into walls. The roofs were poles and thatch weighing over 3 tons. And they leaked for days after every rain, dripping mud onto beds and tables, while cloth stretched across the ceilings caught what it could. Bugs crawled through the walls, and snakes followed the mice that nested in the sod. But the walls were thick, and they held heat well. And on January 12th, the sod houses would save lives. The one-room schoolhouses were another matter. They were built of sod or thin boards, heated by a single stove burning coal that had to be hauled from the nearest town, sometimes 50 miles away, and then run by teenage girls earning a few dollars a month. Children walked anywhere from half a mile to several miles each way. The nearest neighbor could be a mile off, the nearest town 10, and there were no telephones, no real roads, no landmarks on the flat ground to find your way by. If you couldn't see, you couldn't move. The winter of 1887 to 1888 had been one of the worst anyone on the plains could remember. Morris, Minnesota, got 39 inches of snow in December alone, and Mankato got 33. A massive ice storm on January 5th coated the whole region in glass, snapping telegraph wires and killing cattle where they stood. From January 6th through 11th, daytime highs in Omaha barely cracked 0, and families sat around stoves burning twisted hay and dried cow dung when the coal ran out. Schools had been closed for days, and some for weeks, and children hadn't seen the inside of a classroom or the faces of their friends since before Christmas. So when January 12th came in warm, people did what anyone would do. Valentine, Nebraska hit 30 degrees by 6 in the morning, and Huron, Dakota Territory, climbed to 40, with some parts of the plains jumping 20 to 40 degrees above normal in a matter of hours. The Minneapolis Tribune called the day bright and clear. Farmers who had kept their cattle penned for weeks turned them out to graze, and parents who had kept their children home finally let them go to school. People stepped outside without hats or scarves, and some farmers worked outside all day, fixing fences, hauling feed, making up for all the work the cold had stolen. Charles McCourtney, a Nebraska cattleman, and noticed something that morning that bothered him. His fat cattle wouldn't eat, just stood in the yard with their noses raised, sniffing the air. He would later say that the animals were their only weather gauge, and on the morning of this memorable day, they would not eat at all. 600 miles to the northwest, near Medicine Hat in the Canadian territory of Alberta, a mass of Arctic air that had been building for 4 days had started to move. The cold front was only 300 to 400 feet high, sliding under the warm air, and it would cross 780 miles of open prairie and reach the schoolhouses of Nebraska and Dakota Territory by mid-afternoon, moving at 60 miles per hour with a temperature drop so sharp that one weather station would record the air falling 18 degrees in 3 minutes. And the United States Army Signal Corps, which served as the country's weather service, saw it coming. And before midnight on January 11th, a lieutenant in St. Paul sent out a cold wave warning for Dakota and Nebraska. The warning was right, and it made no difference, because not one of the families on the prairie would ever see it. The storm hit Montana before dawn, swept through Dakota Territory by mid-morning, and reached Nebraska between 2 and 3 in the afternoon, right as schools were letting out. A Dakota schoolboy who had been playing outside in his shirt sleeves looked up and saw it coming. He said it looked like something rolling toward them with great fury from the northwest, a long string of enormous cotton bales bound with heavy silver cords, the broad front about 25 feet high, and above that front, a perfectly clear blue sky. It hit his schoolhouse hard enough to nearly push the building off its cobblestone foundation. Carl Salti, a teenage Norwegian immigrant in Fortier, Minnesota, saw a dark and heavy wall rising from the northwest, coming fast like a thunderstorm, like a shot. And a farmer in Valley Springs, South Dakota, heard a sound he first mistook for the Omaha train. The storm came, he said, as if it had slid out of a sack. The blizzard dropped only 4 inches of new snow in Omaha and 7 in Lincoln. What made it deadly was what the wind did with the snow already on the ground. Gusts of 60 to 80 miles per hour turned it into a wall of ice crystals, moving sideways, fine as sifted flour, and tiny needles that froze people's eyes shut in seconds and packed into noses and mouths until cattle and people alike choked to death where they stood. You could not see 3 feet in front of you. Emily Vale, a school teacher in Stanton County, Nebraska, opened her door and saw nothing at all. The air so full of snow it was like someone had hung a white sheet right in front of her face. One station recorded 44 degrees at 2 in the afternoon, 11 below zero by 9 that night, and 42 below by the next morning, an 86-degree drop in less than 18 hours. By January 13th, Fargo sat at 47 below, and Neche, Dakota Territory, hit 58 below. And inside the schoolhouses, the coal was running out. Across hundreds of one-room schoolhouses on the treeless prairie, teachers had to make a choice that many of them would carry for the rest of their lives. They could keep the children inside as fuel ran out, or they could send them into the storm, and either way, children could die. Most of these schoolhouses had a day or two of coal on hand, and once it was gone, there was nothing left to burn but the furniture. What each teacher did next is the part of this story that stays with you. Minnie Freeman, 19, taught 13 students at a sod schoolhouse in Mira Valley, Nebraska. When the first blast hit, it tore the leather-hinged door off the frame, and the boys helped her nail it back on, but a second gust tore the whole roof off the building. Freeman had taken a ball of twine away from a student named Frankie Gibbon earlier that day, and she used it to tie the children together in pairs. She picked up the youngest and told them they would all have to stick together, and if anyone stopped to rub cold hands, everyone would stop. Then she walked them into the white. Blind in the storm, finding her way by memory of a path she walked every day, she led 13 children roughly half a mile to her boarding house. All 13 made it. A mother who came to the destroyed schoolhouse the next morning, expecting the worst, found every one of them alive. Freeman got a gold medal from the Nebraska State Education Board and more than 80 marriage proposals from strangers across the country. Too much was made, she told the Omaha World Herald, over an act of simple duty. Seymour Dopp in Pawnee City kept all 17 of his students inside the schoolhouse overnight, as burning every piece of stored wood through the bitter hours and then burning desks and chairs when the wood ran out. At dawn, parents arrived to find every child alive. His own 11-year-old daughter Avis, at a different school across town, was let out by her teacher and nearly froze walking one city block home, the wind catching her long dress and knocking her flat so many times she later said she was down as much as she was up. In one school near Sioux Falls, a teacher locked the door and begged the children to stay inside. The older boys overpowered him, forced the door open, and ran for home. And some of them made it, but one family lost 3 sons. Loie Royce, teaching near Plainview, Nebraska, sent her 6 oldest students home and kept the 3 youngest, Peter Poggency, 9, Otto Rosberg, 9, and Hattie Rosberg, 6. By 3 in the afternoon, the coal was gone, and the schoolhouse was losing heat. Her boarding house stood 82 yards away, and on any normal day, she could have walked it in under a minute. She gathered the 3 children and stepped outside. They could not see a thing, and the wind pushed them southeast until they were lost. The children froze to death in Royce's arms on the open prairie, 82 yards from the door she was trying to reach. When they were found the next morning, Royce was barely alive, and both her feet were cut off above the ankles. She later learned to walk on wooden legs, married, and moved to California. But before she left Nebraska, she paid for a stone in the Plainview Cemetery for Peter, Otto, and Hattie. Their younger sister Ella wrote years later that her parents were restless after that and moved around a lot, and she didn't believe they ever got over it. Most of the dead that day were children who had already left school or never reached it. The teachers at least had walls. The children caught in the open had nothing at all, and some of them would not be found for days, others not for months. In Seward County, Nebraska, an 11-year-old girl named Lena Wubeck left school alone when her teacher sent the class home. Smallpox had killed her father when she was 5 and scarred her face for life, and she had been sent to work for a neighboring family. She was supposed to walk home with an older boy, but she set out on her own and wandered off the road into rough ground. She fell in a stubble field, pulling her cloak over her body and still holding her school reader in one hand and her dinner pail in the other. At dawn, the man she worked for went looking for her, and from across a ravine he saw a shape on the hillside and called her name. She heard his voice and raised both hands, one holding the reader and the other the pail. Her right foot was cut off, and she lost all the toes on her left. She learned to walk on a wooden foot, married at 24, and died at 25. She was buried in her wedding dress in the graveyard of the Emmanuel Lutheran Church, near a crossroads called Ruby, and if there ever was a town called Ruby, it has disappeared. Lena Wubeck had been alone, but others that day died in groups. Near Freeman, Dakota Territory, 5 boys from Schweitzer Mennonite families left school together to walk a quarter-mile home. But the flat prairie gave them nothing to find their way by, and they wandered for miles. Their bodies were found 3 days later, and when Johann Kaufmann's father came upon his 3 sons in the snow, the oldest had died with his arms wrapped around his younger brother, frozen solid in that position. Their families had crossed an ocean and fled the Tsar's persecution in Ukraine to reach this place. Etta Shattuck was 19 and teaching in Holt County, Nebraska, when the storm caught her walking in the open. She dug into a haystack and stayed there for 78 hours, more than 3 days, without food or water, while the temperature outside held at 30 and 40 below zero. A farmer named Daniel Murphy found her barely alive, and her legs were cut off. But the infection from the surgery killed her on February 7th, at 26 days after the storm. Hallie Merriman was 18 when he was caught in the open with his father. He took off his own overcoat and wrapped it around the older man, then set out to find help. His father's body was found half a mile away, and Hallie was found a short distance from their home. These were only the stories that got names. By the morning of January 13th, the cold that came after the storm was nearly as dangerous as the storm itself. Temperatures stayed between 15 and 25 below zero for the next 10 days, and the ground froze so hard that bodies rang like metal when struck. People had died 12 feet from their own front doors, unable to find them in the white. A farmer shoveling a path to his barn found his wife's body under the snow, and a young Dutch couple was found kneeling side by side with their hands raised. For years afterward, at any large gathering in Dakota or Nebraska, there would be people walking on wooden legs or holding fingerless hands behind their backs or hiding missing ears under hats. John Tlustos, a Czech immigrant whose toes were cut off after the blizzard, was declared insane in 1912 at the age of 50, and a newspaper said it was thought his suffering was the cause. The official count was 235 dead, put together from newspaper reports, but the real number was almost certainly higher because bodies kept turning up for months, and a traveling peddler named O.A. Hunt wasn't found until April 1st. Many more died in the weeks that followed from infection after rough surgery, and nearly all of the known dead were children. And James Jackson, a Scottish immigrant near Woodstock, Minnesota, found his entire cattle herd frozen dead across a 10-mile stretch, some still standing upright in the pasture with snow packed solid in their noses, and ranchers in North Dakota lost more than 80% of their herds. And all of it happened after someone had tried to send a warning. The warning that Lieutenant Thomas Mayhew Woodruff had sent from the new experimental office in St. Paul never reached the people it was meant to save. It traveled by telegraph to post offices and newspaper boards in towns, where it would be pinned up or printed the following day, and families living miles from the nearest town would have had to ride in to see it. Cold wave flags were raised at Signal Corps posts, but in a blizzard they couldn't be seen from more than a few feet away. Yes, there was no way to reach a farmer in his field or a mother in her sod house, and as the storm moved south, it snapped the telegraph wires one by one until the warning sent to Rapid City never got through at all. That failure, along with the great blizzard that hit the East Coast 2 months later and killed over 400, forced Congress to act. President Benjamin Harrison signed the Weather Bureau Organic Act in 1890, moving weather forecasting from the military to a new civilian United States Weather Bureau. But by then, the plains were already emptying out. Western Kansas lost half its people between 1888 and 1892, and the flow of settlers slowed down and never fully came back. Nearly 70% of Plains counties have fewer people now than they did in 1950, And then some are so empty, they meet the Census Bureau's own 19th century definition of frontier. The Greater Nebraska Blizzard Club held its first meeting in the 1940s, more than 50 years after the storm, gathering every January 12th so survivors could share what they remembered. They put out a book in 1947 called In All Its Fury, edited by W.H. O'Gara, himself a survivor and later Nebraska's Speaker of the House. When the WPA Federal Writers Project talked to aging survivors in the 1930s, every one of them could still describe that day as though it had happened that morning. In the cemeteries of Plainview and Freeman and Ruby, if Ruby ever existed, the markers are still there. Small stones for small lives, cut short on an afternoon that started with children walking to school without coats and carrying their readers and their dinner pails, because someone had told their parents this was a good place to live. Now, if you're wondering what kind of people stay on land that did this to their families, we made a video about a 96-ton sod house that's still standing 130 years later. That one's right here.